Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Delta Report. Glad to have you guys here on this Monday, May 29th, 2023. Thank you for tuning in. Now, here's the thing. Is Texas going to go back to a gold standard? You know, it's not the first state that's tried this, and I'm going to tell you there's an awful lot of big money involved in this Ponzi scheme that the Fed's been running for the last over 100 years. They've made themselves rich, basically. And if you guys know about the Federal Reserve is not federal. It's not part of the government. It's actually owned by private banks and private institutions. And they have the ability to create money, what we call money, which is Federal Reserve notes, which have no backing. And because they can print as many as they want, they can make themselves rich. But what Texas is trying to do, it's very interesting. It says it's a gold standard coming back to Texas. Legislators propose a gold-backed digital currency. The gold standard existed under Bretton Woods system until 1971. It is likely never coming back, they say. Well, I'm here to disagree with this. Kicking and screaming, they're going to go back eventually, because what we're going to face is a hyperinflation. And if you guys don't know what hyperinflation is, it comes about because of their ability to create as many monetary units as they want. And greed takes over ultimately in the end. And also, because it's a Ponzi scheme, they have to keep doing that in order to keep the system from deflating. So eventually they're going to push this into a hyperinflation. And eventually they're going to have, because when the currency becomes worthless, eventually they're going to have to go back to something that has value. And gold has value. Texas is just jumping the gun a little bit on this process. And because they're jumping the gun on this process, they're probably going to come down with a hard hand and not allow this to continue for now. What I'm saying is in the future, it's probably going to go this way eventually. But they're only going to go back to a gold standard, kicking and screaming. They're not going to do it voluntarily. And anyway, it says the gold standard existed under the Bretton Woods system until 1971. Is likely never coming back, but there are a myriad of reasons for this, but the most important lie within the United States government's ability to control the economy. Under a gold standard, the government no longer has the tools it uses to support the economy. These tools involve them making themselves rich and printing more and more money. And they're not going to have that ability anymore if they're on gold. It basically, what it is it locks them in so that they just can't enrich themselves any longer. And of course, this is huge for them. I mean, they're not going to do this voluntarily, and they're not going to do it until they're forced to. It says this mostly includes the government's control over the United States dollar. Under a gold standard, those with the most gold naturally control the dollar. While a large portion of gold is mined in the United States, a majority is produced by foreign powers. Moving back to the gold standard would ineffectively entail surrendering the dollar to the control of those with the most stockpiles of the metal. Of course, Russia and China have been stockpiling the metal because they know, they're very smart. They know that eventually that the United States will be forced back to a gold standard. And they're already ready. They're prepared. Russia, unofficially, how much gold does Russia and China, how much do they put away? Well, for years, all the time I've been doing this show, the gold has been being shipped from west to east. And the Chinese have been smelting the gold down into 1 kilogram sized bars and stacking it away and stacking it away and stacking it away. I've heard stories that the Chinese might have as much as 24,000 tons of gold put away. And Russia maybe 20,000 tons more. And whether they got over here in the West collectively, we couldn't touch those numbers. Not even come close. Collectively. I do understand that the United States claims to have a lot of gold, but there's never been an audit of Fort Knox. There's never been an audit. Not in recent history. I mean, when I say there's never been an audit, not in recent history, there hasn't been. And if we take a look at countries like Germany, Germany has a lot of gold, and there's other countries that have quite a little bit of gold. Canada ain't gotten any. They gave all theirs away. That's the biggest foolish move there ever was in the history of the world. It says, so Bretton Woods gold standard isn't tenable. It's not tenable under a Ponzi scheme. But it is tenable. And we were under a gold standard until 1971. And I'm going to tell you, times were a lot better back then than they are now. It says the current fiat system is much less problematic. To who? To the ones who are enriching themselves. They love it. Many believe that the new system concentrates too much power in the Federal Reserve. For example, the Fed increased the M2 money supply, the amount of all dollars in circulation, including deposits, by 27% in 2020 and 2021 under its aggressive quantitative easing program that aimed to prevent a recession. This was the largest increase in the country's history, beating out even the Second World War. Second World War, 18%. So 27% during COVID. And the 2008 financial crisis, 10%. To the surprise of almost no one, this heavily contributed to widespread lasting inflation that is still affecting American citizens today. But this is going to continue. You know, the Fed's aggressive tightening schedule that they're on right now, everybody's aware of this. And if you're not, you should be. This is going to ultimately lead to the economy. See, you cannot taper a Ponzi scheme. It's going to ultimately lead to a very sharp downturn in the economy, which I've been talking about, that I label the deflationary spike event. Sharp downturn coming directly ahead, and this is going to change the policies. But Texas is a little bit ahead of this. It says a full gold standard is probably impossible, but State Senator Brian Hughes and Representative Mark D'Orazio of Texas think that they have found a way to bring back many of its benefits. They introduced matching bills to the respective houses that propose the introduction of a gold-backed digital currency. The bills state that the state comptroller shall establish a digital currency that is backed by gold, so that each unit of the digital currency issued represents a particular fraction of the troy ounce of gold held in trust. They would also require that the trustees shall maintain enough gold to provide for the redemption of gold in all units of the digital currency that have been issued and not yet redeemed for money or gold to prevent bank runs. The bill's sponsors made sure to add that the funds received from purchasing the digital currency, the gold held under the trust, and any proceeds resulting from the sale of the redeemed gold are not available for legislative appropriation. This would prevent the state legislatures from pillaging the trust, and hopefully keeping the gold backing intact. So they're worried about that right off initially, before they even start this project. They're worried that the state legislative part of the state, are going to appropriate the gold. In other words, pillage it out of the vaults. Okay, so the bill is fascinating in many different ways. It is an interesting attempt to return to some resemblance of the gold standard, as well as one of the world's first potential experiments in central bank digital currencies. So this is going to be a central bank digital currency, backed by gold, backed by Texas. You know, I'm going to tell you what, I like Texas. You know, everything's bigger and better in Texas. They got the biggest hamburgers, they got the biggest everything, hot dogs, anything you want. And there's a one heck of a big state. If you ever drove across Texas, I'm going to tell you, it is a big state. And with the exception of Alaska, you know, I mean, Alaska's huge, but Texas is one big son of a gun of a state, and it's a great state, you know. Anyway, enough about Texas, but you got to hand it to them. You got to give them kudos. They are trying to take us back to something real. rather than this fiat money Ponzi scheme that we've been on for the last number of years. And I got to hand it to them. Even though they're jumping the gun a little bit, because why I say that is I personally believe that eventually we're going to be forced to go back to a gold standard. But only when these Keynesians and their monetary experiment totally fails and crashes and burns, and they have no other way out. They will try anything to keep this system because it enriches them. So it's only at the point of when they are absolutely forced to go back to a gold standard. That's when they're going to go back. And what's going to force them to go back is inflation that gets out of hand, completely goes crazy at some point, and goes into a hyperinflation. You guys don't know what hyperinflation is? I'll explain it to you. It's when you wake up in the morning and your dollar, say, will buy a piece of bubble gum. And by night it takes $2 by that night to buy the same piece of bubble gum. And the next day it takes $4 to buy the same piece of bubble gum. And ultimately it ends when your currency won't buy nothing, because all the value of it's been inflated away. And if you guys out there, some of you guys think that that's impossible, that'll never ever happen. Well, it happened in Germany, it's happened in Zimbabwe, it's happened like 100 different times around the world. In fact, every fiat currency has happened to. A true fiat currency. Now, just talking for a minute, guys, and a lot of you guys don't know this. By 1971, when they took the dollar off the gold standard, they switched very quickly to an oil standard. But it was a loose peg to oil. It basically worked like this. It was called the petrodollar, where nobody in the world could buy oil with anything except dollars, so they needed to buy dollars first in order to buy oil. And this put an artificial demand on the dollar, thereby giving the dollar a backing. Why this is so important is, and why the dollar's now, just now it's starting to become a true fiat currency, meaning it's not backed by oil any longer, is because the BRICS nations are working very hard to break that peg, and they're starting to trade in things other than dollars for oil. And so it hasn't completely happened yet. It's in the works, where the dollar is becoming a true fiat currency. Now, these other fiat currencies that are connected to the dollar only derive their value from the dollar. Other currencies like the Swiss franc, the Canadian dollar, the Japanese yen, the British pound, and so on. These other currencies that are connected to the dollar, they derive their value from the dollar. So when the dollar sinks, all these other fiat currencies of the West are going to sink with the dollar. And this is actually what the BRICS nations, to come out from underneath dollar hegemony, the BRICS nations are working toward this goal of making themselves the top currencies in the world. This is not just a trade war that's been going on for a number of years, but it's also a currency war. It's a money war. It's a Cold War. It's East against West. And they mean to be the dominant force. And they've been very smart by putting away huge amounts of gold for themselves. Thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we're going to catch you guys in the very next show. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.